My name is Hannah, and this is my beauty budget. Hey guys, so I am about to do something that I do all the time, which is just play with my single shadows. And I decided to do it on camera. I have the camera set up for overhead filming, and I also have occasion to really move things around because I just received this in the mail today. Sandra from Adept Cosmetics, the owner of Adept Cosmetics, sent this to me as a gift just because we've been chatting a lot and I've been talking a lot about my big magnetic palette on social media because I love it so much. She asked if she could send this and just get my opinion on it, and so she sent it along. It's the Adept palette, the original sort of magnetic palette that they created. It's double-sided and it has this little insert in the middle. So I have this, I have my big palette, and then I have an assortment of smaller magnetic palettes that have come to me through various avenues over the past several months, and some extra single shadows that have been given to me that you guys haven't really seen yet. Because it's hard to put single shadows in the reckoning. I tried to do it one month and it was difficult. It took up extra time, and it's kind of hard to reckon with single shadows. Most single shadows have just kind of made their way into my collection, and I think that I'll reckon with them the next time I do a single shadow declutter. But they're all sort of spread out between a bunch of different palettes. I'm interested in putting some shadows into this palette and just seeing how it feels. So I have no goals. I'm just gonna play. And I might create, I said I have no goals, but I might create a palette. I might create like a little palette to keep front and center, to create like a little color story. That's often what I end up doing when I play with my singles. But that's it. I'm just going to play with my singles, move them around, think about color combinations, do some swatching. Let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. So let's start here. This is my most recently made palette. I put a bunch of yellows. I previously had all my yellow singles in here because I duped the vibes of the Honey palette. And then that palette evolved. So I switched out some of those yellows for some of these greens, like dusky greens. And I've been kind of playing with this palette for a while. This has kind of been my go-to palette for the last week. So I'm ready to have this one be broken up. It doesn't need to be living in this little palette anymore. This little palette is the one that I usually use to create my sort of like go-to singles palette for a week or two at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take these shadows out and recreate the color story kind of in a little corner of this Adept palette. I feel like that might be the best way to use this. So let's see how that looks. I'm actually not going to include these in my Adept palette here. I'm going to put them back where they belong in the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I had taken them out for a little while to put them in this little palette, but I'm ready for them to return home. So I feel like this little corner of like greens and mustards is its own little world. I decided to take the pinks out. This is actually a eyeshadow that I bought recently from JD Glow. It's their eyeshadow called Opal, and I've been using it a lot as both a brow bone highlight and a cheek highlight. It's pretty spectacular. It doesn't have the creamy fluffiness of the other Galaxy shadows that I've purchased from JD Glow, like this one, which I think is called 365. I think that's what this one's called. Yeah, so this one's called 365, and it has that extraordinary glittery quality that the other two that I own, Unexpected and Good God, have. Opal is more just really, really shiny and sort of semi-sheer and opalescent. And then Fairy Acid, which is the third one that I purchased recently, is disappointing. It's basically just like a sort of a dull gray eyeshadow with a bunch of glitter mixed in. It doesn't have the same intense, unique quality as these other two. It's so disappointing that I almost wonder if something went wrong with the batch when they were making this one, because it's unlike anything. I mean, my JD Glow eyeshadows are my favorite eyeshadows of all time, and this is just so unlike that, even though it was sold as a Galaxy shadow and it was supposed to be, you know, it's supposed to be the same formula. It's supposed to be part of the same collection. It's just it's just definitely not. But I do feel like that kind of greenish gray, it's like a light mossy greenish gray, works with this little color story. So I'm going to keep that corner there. And you know what? I'm going to put these pinks on the other side of the palette. I'm going to put them on the other half. And you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to keep building. So I'm going to keep building on this green and gold idea, and I'm going to keep building on this kind of like mauve pink idea on these two sides and just see what happens. These are 5 Nabla shadows that were sent to me by one of you. I haven't gotten that much of a chance to play around with them, but I definitely think that they can work in this like greeny, mauvey palette situation. So I'm going to include them. This one's called Cinnamon. I really like that. And this is Alchemy, which is kind of a legendary Nabla shadow. At least it's legendary in my life because I watch Zayn San and she's always talking about it. It's very beautiful. It's got a little bit thinner and less intense and creamy than, for example, the JD Glow ones, which when you swatch these ones from JD Glow, a lot of pigment picks up. I feel like Alchemy from Nabla, it just picks up a little bit less pigment at a time. I have to build up more layers to get the same effect, but it is genuinely very beautiful. This is another palette. This is a palette full of singles that were sent to me by a subscriber, and the overwhelming kind of like single situation that has come from receiving so many singles, which actually it hasn't even been that many. Like I think 3 of you have sent me single shadows, 3 or 4 of you, but they just add up so quickly. And I think it's kind of time to put the brakes on receiving gifts of this nature because it's just becoming way, way too much as I appreciate them, because I really, really do. A lot of these are Sydney Grace. Wait, some of them are Sydney Grace. A lot of them are Luxie. It's like Sydney Grace and Luxie. A lot of these are, and I've been so impressed by these formulas. I mean, the Sydney Grace and Luxie shadows have like just blown me out of the water. I'm really, really grateful to have received these and to be able to play with them. And I think that the shadows in this little palette will definitely suit the color scheme that I'm building over here in my Adept palette. So I'm going to go ahead and disperse them into their proper areas over here. This is one of my favorite eyeshadows that I've ever seen, ever. It's called Juno, and it's from Luxie, and it's just this extraordinary dimensional kind of browny bronze, dark, dusky, grungy, really, really shiny. I just love it. I think I love how it looks in the pan as much as I love how it looks. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm on manual focus, so I don't know if I can bring it closer to the lens. I'll zoom in. And this is a highlighter. It's a Sydney Grace highlighter called Pumpkin Spice Latte Extra Whip. And I'm gonna put this in this little palette, which is where I'm currently keeping my single face shadow, except for that green eyeshadow, which I think I'm trying to declutter. All of the rest of these are blushes and highlighters. So I put this one aside because I just recently purchased this Build Your Own palette from ColourPop, except that I traded out 2 of them for 2 Makeup Geek shadows, these 2 darker colored ones. But I don't want to break up this palette right now because I'm really enjoying having it and playing with it. So I'm just gonna leave these be, even though some of them would suit this side of the Adept palette really well, and they may eventually find their way in here. For now, I'm keeping this intact. So this is another Adept palette. They're just stunning. I'm really grateful that they've been willing to send a couple along just so that I can keep confirming that everything that they make is really, really good, because I have a code with them, or I have a code with them, and I just want, it's good to be able to know that it's not just this one that I happened to buy that happened to be amazing. Everything's incredibly well designed, well built, beautiful. I was stunned when I opened the package and took this out of it today. It actually looks way better in person than it does on the website. Like, it's really, really a lot sharper, cleaner, shinier, and just beautifully built. It's a really, really nice tool. So I'm not going to put all of these in here, but I'm going to put a lot of them, the ones that seem to kind of make sense. Many of these up here are Makeup Geek shadows. These ones down here are Natasha Denona, but I think I'm actually going to keep this as an all-round. It's obviously different sizes of round shadows, but I'm going to keep it all round. So I'm not going to put these Natasha Denona ones in. But the other ones that make sense, it's mostly Makeup Geek. Some of these are Luxie down here. And I think these two are also both Nabla. All right, let's dip into this big one right here. So I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing here. Let me see if you can see both. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing here. So the more yellowy greens and greeny greens are kind of starting to group over here. Some more blue greens and even some gray blues and gray greens are starting to group over here. And then the mostly mauves, but leaning towards red a little bit and also leaning towards purple a little bit are starting to group over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice this palette to this one. I'm going to start breaking this up. Not like it was any kind of masterpiece. I've been removing and replacing these for ages and they've all gotten mixed in. You know, the way that I had it kind of semi-organized after I did my single shadow declutter, they've all gotten mixed in with each other since then. So it's not organized at all, but I'm going to drain this in a way to build this just for fun. And then what I'll do is organize these ones in a more kind of like color copacetic way. Okay, so here are the shadows that I decided to pull for this little color organization project. And now I'm just gonna go through and try to group like with like. Obviously, these are different sizes of shadows. I don't like it when in a palette like this, it's like all of the ones of the same size are lined up and then the next biggest size is lined up and then it's empty space from there. I know some of you guys get uncomfortable when it's all spread out like this randomly, but I'm the opposite. It makes me uncomfortable when it seems like someone tried to make everything fit symmetrically in an organized way, but the shadows just weren't designed that way. The selection of shadows here that I've picked aren't designed, like they're not gonna fit in they're not gonna be symmetrical. It's not gonna be symmetrical. So I am just gonna let them kind of be like an amoeba and be kind of messy, but I am gonna start grouping them into kind of more organized color stories and just see what I come up with. Let's start with this side, and I'll zoom you in so you can see better. Okay, so what I decided to do is to have these four kind of versions of this color story, these four kind of linchpins of this color story in the four corners. So we have this eggplant purple here. Here we have like a peachy bronze. Here we have more of a red, a reddish pink almost. And here we have like a grayish mauve. So those groups of colors are going to grow from those corners. And I think that's how I'm going to organize it. Okay, so the organizing principle really worked, I feel, to make it more visually cohesive, but then I decided I didn't want them in the corners with space in the middle. I would rather have them grouped in the middle with space in the corners. So that's how that one ended up. Let's work on the other side. Okay, so this one evolved a little bit more organically. I started with the yellows here, kind of the brightest yellows, and I let the mustards kind of drift over here. And then these are the greenish yellows, which turned into the greener greens and the more forest greens. And those easily evolved into like the greenish blues, the teals, and gave way to this last funny little category, which is sort of like a slightly green tinged mauve. It's almost like this group is the wedding between this side of the palette and this other side of the palette. You can kind of see that this has something in common with these. So in that way, they're sort of tied together. I don't know if I want to move these around so there's not this awkward long space. I think I do. I think I'm going to kind of group them in the middle like I did over here. All right, that's looking a little bit more like the amoeba of color that I prefer. So here is what we ended up with. This is the result of today's makeup playtime or single eyeshadow playtime. Just moving shadows around to get inspired and just be creative and play with color. Maybe this kind of goes without saying, but I prefer to organize my eyeshadows by color. I think of them in terms of color, and even though the formulas vary and I try to remember when there are individual shadows that I really, really love and gravitate towards, I have a pretty good color memory, and so when I see them, I usually know what they are. Even if the Luxie shadows and the Makeup Geek and the JD Glow shadows are like all mixed in with each other in these big palettes, I usually remember which ones are which. And sometimes it's fun to forget because you find yourself reaching for shadows that you wouldn't ordinarily reach for just because they draw your attention on the day that you happen to be working with that palette. So it's going to be fun having this on my vanity and opening it every day and seeing what I'm drawn to and what I decide to do. Again, this is really great. This little magnetic palette is really great. It's really, really well made, very functional. And I like this kind of double-sided organization and this like dual color chamber situation. I think it's going to be really, really fun to have. So that's it. There's really not a point to this except for fun and play and looking at eyeshadows and thinking about color. Again, this is something that I do all the time, and I just decided to film it for you guys today. So, so I hope that you enjoyed this one, you guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you do this from time to time, and if so, how does your decision making differ from mine? And don't forget to take extra good care of yourself this week so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.